Hey Luke, thanks so much for hopping on a call, man. Should be a real quick one.
No, not at all. I'd be lying if I didn't say, well, this is one of those cases.
Yeah, it's a first for me.
You're really doing the whole thing remotely?
Yep. Until things open up down there, it's back to Zoom.
Oh, Jesus. Excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, it's challenging. But it's not always a bad thing. Stops you getting complacent.
Well, can't imagine DCI McAllister getting complacent.
True that. You ready to kick off?
Yeah,
Okay. I need to let you know that this call is being recorded so that I can share with
okay.
the rest of the team and DCI McAllister, who's leading the investigation.
I've worked with Tessa on a number of cases.
Yeah. Awesome, right?
Yeah.
Cool. For the record, I'm DS Bastara. I'm talking with toxicology expert Luke Kajmarek. Did I pronounce that right at all?
Close enough. Catch my right.
Kajmarek, right, thank you. So, diving in on the case. Have you had time to read through everything that I
Yeah,
sent you?
yeah, yeah. I've looked deeper into winter over syndrome. Not the first thing you learn about as a toxicologist.
I know, right?
Fascinating.
So, the first thing to ask you, just parking
Hmm.
winter over syndrome for a second, but what sort of drugs could have caused Mark Rennick's breakdown?
Putting winter over syndrome aside.
Yeah, just forgetting that for now.
So, what drugs would you be looking out for that could have caused or contributed to Mark Rennick's state of psychosis?
Exactly.
Are we talking illegal or prescription?
Either. Both.
Okay. Obviously, this is a little unorthodox. I haven't had a
Yeah.
chance to examine Mark Rennick myself, but looking at the medical reports provided and making comparisons with known outcomes of drug-induced psychosis, well, I just want to come at this from a slightly different angle. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, well, the symptoms of drug-induced psychosis are often gradual. As the frequency and or dosage of the drug increases with dependency, the toxicity of that drug becomes more dangerous.
Hmm.
A gradual decline into a psychotic episode. That's what you'd normally expect to see in most textbook cases. Now, as Mark Rennick's psychotic episode is described in reports, there was no gradual build up to the episode. He was described as being, or feeling, relatively normal, and then quite suddenly showing signs of extreme and violent psychosis, described as basically coming out the blue.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, so this is where I do have to bring secondary factors into the equation, that of any underlying mental health condition. Now, I know you want to put winter over syndrome aside, but if there was an underlying mental health condition, in this case, let's say winter over syndrome, then use of psychoactive drugs would likely worsen your symptoms.
Psychoactive?
Well, psychoactive, psychopharmaceutical, psychotropic. It's a chemical substance that changes the function of the nervous system, resulting in alterations of perception, mood, cognition, and behavior. It changes that are often amplified in people with underlying mental health conditions.
Uh-huh. And just to be clear, how would that play out, symptoms-wise?
Well, in layman terms, it'd be like taking steroids and working out at the gym. Faster results, more extreme symptoms.
Uh-huh.
We see this very often in patients where both prescribed and recreational drug use dramatically speeds up the onset of psychotic disorders such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia.
And what about if you don't have one of those disorders? Mark Rennick doesn't have anything like that on his medical records.
Well, of course, he could be undiagnosed. That is leaning more into psychology, but from my perspective and from experience, extensive use of drugs and alcohol can also cause symptoms of psychosis to occur, even if you aren't diagnosed with co occurring mental illness or have a genetic predisposition towards them. But I know you're not at liberty to discuss the case with me, but some of this crosses over. You need to speak with a psychologist.
Okay, cool, noted. Thank you. Yeah, we are covering from all angles. So can you just clarify for us what symptoms you might see for a drug-induced psychosis?
It's a veritable pick and mix.
Huh.
I mean, in no particular order, paranoia, delusional disorderly behavior, both auditory and visual hallucinations, also olfactory hallucinations.
Sorry, Luke, what's that?
Oh, phantasmia, smells that aren't really there.
Okay.
It's actually more common than you think. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of a lot of people referring to the smell of burnt toast when they're having a stroke. Well, that's triggered from the same parts of the brain.
Uh-huh. And not relevant, as far as we know, to Mark Rennick's case?
No, but Reading the redacted report, things like antisocial behavior, panic attacks, confusion, aggression,
Yeah, those are relevant.
are very common with state of drug-induced psychosis.
Okay. And which drugs are we talking about here? What drugs can induce this level of psychosis?
Do you mean drugs he could get hold of?
Yeah, well, that's a multifaceted question. He could have brought drugs in with him. He could have been given or stolen drugs from the medical facilities. There's a number.
Or any reported missing?
I don't have that information.
Presume they have drugs stored for the winter season?
Yeah, I mean, before we go into too much speculation, let's just go with what drugs might be able to cause this.
Recreational or prescription?
Recreational first.
Okay. Recreational drugs, often reported in cases of drug-induced psychosis, include cannabis, cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamine, psychedelic drugs like LSD, and club drugs such as ecstasy and MDMA.
Mm-hmm. And do they all result in the same symptoms?
Symptoms can vary depending on which drugs have been taken, how much has been taken, for how long, but heavy and excessive use can result in more prolonged symptoms.
So you wouldn't be able to separate the drugs into separate symptoms?
Well, you can. I'd say marked symptoms are on the generalized side, which makes it that much harder to pinpoint an exact drug. Obviously, a psychosis accompanied by hallucinations might go hand in hand with psychedelic drug taking.
Oh, he didn't have any reported hallucinations.
No, I know. But what I was going to say was that even though he didn't display signs of hallucinations, I couldn't wholeheartedly rule out psychedelics without doing a specific blood test. However, recreational drugs that could have caused that psychosis would have cleared his system by now anyway and not shown as blood work.
Really?
Yep. Even cannabis, which has a longer half-life, it can, in some cases, show up in a test up to a month later, but not in blood. In a urine test, I mean, have they tested for urine?
I don't know.
Okay, well, the long and short of it is, any of those drugs would have cleared out of Mark's system by now anyway.
Okay. Great, let's move on to prescription meds.
You mean medications that he could have brought with him or could be found on the base?
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's reports and a number of studies of benzodiazepines and opiate painkillers causing serious psychotic symptoms, particularly after misuse, but not always. Like I said, sometimes precipitated by underlying mental health conditions. But I should add, this is in the minority of patients taking the drugs. The majority of people wouldn't have that reaction, or the medical council, the FDA, would take it off the shelves.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Not to throw petrol on the fire, but anybody could have a reaction to one drug or another. We're only just starting to understand the psychological effects of menopause medication or hormone blockers. Or
Okay. Well, we have to assume for now Mark wasn't taking anything like that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's my job, though, in a world of near infinite, to give you the most likely, the most credible. But there are always outliers.
Yeah, understood.
And, to throw in another googly, even things like ketamine and LSD have been prescribed by doctors for chronic pain or mental health conditions. I mean, not here in the UK, but in other countries. I'm not sure if that's relevant necessarily.
Helpful, but yeah, it's good to bear in mind.
It was a really comprehensive study by the National Institute of Health. It was on specific drugs and the prevalence of psychotic symptoms related to their use. So I could forward that on to you after this chat, if you'd like.
Yeah, that would also be helpful. Thanks. Oh, sorry. That should be on silent. I got to take this.
That's okay.
We've covered everything. Thanks for being so detailed.
No problem. I'm emailing you that study now.
Great, cool. Thank you, Luke.
Bye-bye.
Get all the files now. Sign up at coldtapes.com and go ad-free.